All right. I love that little tiny intro there that we worked on. If you have not been watching any of our lives recently, like our Podcasters Roundtable and some of the other things that we've been bringing to you live, welcome to our show. This is Suncast Live. I was going to be joined today by my friend Mike Casey from TigerCom, and he is otherwise detained as we are here live in Salt Lake City. In fact, this is a nice backdrop, and I am hanging out with the guys here at Visit Salt Lake. So shout out to Visit Salt Lake. I'm going to see if I can do a quick little camera change. The guys are hanging out in the back of the studio back there. Appreciate you guys. Thanks a lot. Got some lighting. Everything's looking snazzy. Sorry if I'm showing up. Anybody else is going to join the show today? What? There are going to be other people joining the show today. That's right. We're going to talk a little bit about reflections on 2021 and what we got coming for 2022. But there are also some pretty exciting things happening today. Among them, I'm going to invite my friend Bill Nussey up to the stage right now, and he can tell you a little bit about what he's got going on in a second. But first, let me welcome Bill onto the show. Hey, Bill.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
Good to see you, man.
Good to see you, too.
Yeah, live in 1080p HD. I haven't been live in, since maybe our quarterly roundtable, our last one. We've got our next one coming up. And you've got some live things coming up as well soon. But today you went live with a special project. Tell me about that project.
Hey, thanks for asking about it. I spent 4 years putting together a book that actually came out today called Freeing Energy. So for anyone that's listened to our podcast or been to the website called Freeing Energy, it was all towards this book, which is pretty exciting, and it really talks about my passion and focus, which is the rapid disruptive rise of small-scale energy systems and how that's going to remake the grid in a way that nobody sees coming.
Fantastic. And for those of you who are Suncast Tribe faithful and you are subscribers to the podcast, today we released our 1 hour, I call it the abridged version. It's fun when an abridged version is abridged of a 2-hour cut of a 3-hour conversation, where I was invited by Bill to come and spend some time with him in his home down in Georgia, and we dug deep into the who, what, when, where, how, and why freeing energy needed to exist. We can go into some of those details, and I know that Josh Porter, who's going to join us, is definitely going to geek out when he gets a chance to read the book. So why don't we just go ahead and say hello to Josh Porter, longtime contributor to Suncast. Thanks, Josh, for joining us.
I love the dog.
Aloha, folks. How you doing? Josh here with the Solar Coaster. We have some pretty serious storm events, actually under blizzard warning, if you believe that, in Hawaii. And so Loki's going to join me in studio today because he doesn't like the crazy weather.
That's awesome.
Unbelievable.
And your dog's name is Loki.
Loki. His name's Loki.
Josh, what's the brand of that wind turbine behind you?
That is the GE Halliot X, and they come in 12, 13, 14 meg varieties. They're being deployed, or they're actually starting construction on the Vineyard Wind project in the offshore wind area up there. Right now, we did a show with Vineyard Wind on our last project. So yeah, I figured it's a good time to showcase the Halliot X.
So cool. I've never been even up to a wind tower, like close enough to touch it. Bill, I understand that you've gone to a wind tower or two, right?
I went all over the world when I was researching this book, and when a friend of mine says, hey, you want to climb a wind turbine, I said, well, the book's kind of about solar more than wind, but heck yeah. So I've got a great photo of me sitting on top of one of those wind turbines, and you can't see my face, and I'm absolutely terrified sitting out there in the open, so high up in the air, but it was quite one of the more memorable parts of that journey of researching the book.
So guys, I want to talk a little bit about, first of all, Josh, if you have any questions you want to pepper Bill with on his book. We were expecting that Mike Casey would join us today, but he can't join us live. We are going to have, and it's one of the things that I wanted to make sure we touch on in the LinkedIn Live, next Wednesday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. I'll drop a link down here in a minute. We're going to have our Podcasters Roundtable. I think it's our third, and it's our final sort of quarterly wrap-up of the year. It's hosted by TigerCom and produced by us at Suncast with our friends in the clean tech podcasting circle. Bill has been on, Josh has been on, Tim Montague, who I think may be joining us today if he jumps in studio, has been on, Julia Piper, Kelly Pickerel, Marie Berquist from GRNE. We've had a fun cast. If you can think of a clean tech podcaster that has not been on our podcast roundtable that should be, I'd love for you to nominate them. You can do that in the comments, whatever platform you're watching on, or you can email me, nico@mysuncast.com, and we'll reach out and make sure that they get on. I know we'd love to have the folks from Norton. There's a number of others that have obviously clean tech podcasts. So we try every quarter to get together the clean tech podcasters that we admire and sort of are in the same circle with. Ask them thoughtful questions about what they are experiencing, what they're publishing about, kind of like TigerCom's quarterly editors roundtable, which is more for traditional journalism editor conversations. So, Josh, with that, I wanted to actually give you a chance. You have been working on a pretty fun project that you've talked about in a couple of past roundtables, but what's the update on your documentary right now?
Yeah, thanks for calling it a documentary. The update is that editing is difficult and long. That's the update. It's been basically working with SBI and currently rebranded as RE Plus, which I think is pretty cool rebranding there. So we've incorporated those logos into 6 core videos around kind of these fundamental sectors of the new energy economy, the renewable energy revolution, right? So you'll see in the back here the GE Halliot X. This is from one of the pieces we did in the wind sector video. Each of these sector videos are about 20 minutes. We kind of shot for 10 or 15. That didn't work out. We got a lot of people, probably 36 different interviews, some of them actual physical on-site shoots around the country for this cross-country journey we did, but then a lot of backed up kind of remote shoots as well. And yeah, it had some amazing people on. Vineyard Wind in particular, in the case of the wind piece, we did Vineyard as the kind of culminating piece, which talks about the potential for offshore wind, both floating and anchored. And I learned boatloads because, we just don't do a lot of wind. As Bill just said a moment ago, it's like we tend to think about other areas, and wind is brand new for me. So when I tend to have all the tech in my mind going, let's talk about solar and batteries and EVs, when I get into wind, it's kind of like, I don't know very much. So we got a chance to talk to the Vineyard Wind guys. Andrew Doba is the chief comms guy, and Lars, the CEO of Vineyard Wind. Very exciting stuff. We're talking about, I think like 800 megs maybe is the total, with like 60 plus wind turbines. Really remarkable stuff. And then learned a lot about the scope of that, right? Where other offshore wind leases are being proposed around the country. NREL just did a study on Oahu for offshore wind. So it's really an exciting kind of birth of an industry in a sense. We also worked on some small wind. This company out of Israel called Flower Wind Turbines. Really cool stuff, Helic kind of stuff. And then Goldwind as an example. For large-scale terrestrial wind, really amazing company. So we did that across 6 sectors: microgrid, storage, hydrogen, EV, what else did I say? Solar, obviously, and wind. And it's quite a journey, just about wrapping up now. So I look forward to showcasing it soon. That's fantastic. And as I mentioned to you guys before, we don't lean on me to necessarily guide all the discussion, because the 3 of us are good friends at this point, and I'm sure have lots to contribute. One of the things that stands out to me, Josh, in particular, you and I both, sun, solar in the brand, it's kind of what we've been focused on for the last 15 plus years. Neither of us really have a whole lot of experience, like you said, in wind, certainly in nuclear, not a ton in hydro or geothermal, but the industry at large is expanding. As you indicated, SPI is now rebranded RE Plus, renewable energy, is as a category is expanding, and solar and wind are definitely the most well-known, the most well-documented, and certainly the most well-proliferated technologies. I'm here in Salt Lake City because the AWEA, formerly America Wind Energy Association, rebrand this year to America Clean Power Association, is having their annual conference here in Salt Lake City. It's called CleanPower21. And the number one reason why I came is I just want to know more about how the industry at large is working towards synchronization and harmonization of our messaging, because it's not just one technology. It's not Solar Power International anymore, right? America Clean Power embodies the AWEA community vision for integrating the voices of clean energy, and I want to meet with
Heather Zeichel, who I hope to have in the chair beside me in a few hours to have an interview. If I have a chance, I will live broadcast that as well, but it'll certainly show up on the Suncast podcast, so make sure that you're subscribed there. You could do that at mysuncast.com, by the way, or in any of your podcast players. We'll pause for a minute to note that as podcasters, you can also subscribe to these guys' podcasts. You got Bill over here is at freeingenergy.com. Josh Porter, you're solar-coaster.com, is that right?
That's correct.
All right, so mysuncast.com, freeingenergy.com, and solar-coaster.com. If you want to subscribe to any of the three podcasts, all three of which go deep on personalities and technologies that are defining the clean energy revolution. Bill, I'd love to know what's on your mind as you think about what must be a completely hectic time for you with the book launch.
Yeah, it's today's a crazy day. Tomorrow's a crazy day. Very exciting. We've had a big team working on it with us, and but as I put my head a little further into the future, there's a really big deal coming up on clean energy next week as California decides how it's going to handle net metering. This state led the world really in terms of embracing small scale solar, and my book's entirely about small scale solar and batteries. So California, throughout my research, was an exemplar of what can be done and should be done. And now the state's possibly likely going to step back into the Stone Ages and undo so much of the benefit. And there's a lot in my book, and a lot of the folks I talk to echo it, that the arguments around net metering, which is what's being debated here in California, are a little skewed and maybe not entirely as straightforward as the utilities and some of the advocates for change are making out. So unfortunately, if this ends up as many predict, and 2021 ends with a taking back of this net metering in California, it's going to be a sad end of the year. But other than that, I think there's nothing but reasons to be optimistic and excited. This is, I think, more than any other year in history of clean energy, we've seen the public attention widen, both because there's exciting things happening, but also because the impacts of climate change are being seen and felt by more people than we've ever had before. You don't have to look far in the news to see just how much this is actually happening. I mean, blizzard warnings in Hawaii, really? And there's no snow, and I think they've had less snow in Colorado than any time they've ever measured weather there, if I remember correctly. So it is, that's just crazy, and we need to act. And unfortunately, kind of the world leaders, as we saw at COP26 and we see at U.S. Congress, they're moving a bit more slowly, a bit more hesitantly, a lot more bickering than they need to. And so hopefully this book I've got, which provides a faster path for many people that want to get involved, will be a relief valve where they can maybe lean into it a bit more without waiting on the politicians. We need the politicians to do all the things they're working on, to be clear, but we don't need to wait and do nothing while they figure it out.
So solar plus batteries on the small scale. What a great focus, Bill. I'm so genuinely enthusiastic about reading that because, of course, this has been something that we in Hawaii, I live in Maui, have been experiencing since 2015. I ran a solar business from 08, 09 upwards. And by around 15, 16, we saw the death of net metering out here.
Yes.
And we went to what was called consumer self-supply, consumer grid supply, and the utility kind of said, hey, you can do anything you want as long as you have on-grid batteries that kind of perform all of these magical solutions that didn't pretty much exist. This is pre-Tesla Powerwall, right? And so we tried lots of different stuff, and it was quite a journey. And oh gosh, what a crazy time! So what is the focus? What are some of the things you talk about? What are some of the things you describe in the book?
Well, there's a section of the book called "Hawaii is a Postcard of Our Energy Future."
Right.
So you look at the policies that Hawaii's Listen, Hawaii is an island or set of islands. They are not attached to any of the large continental grids, which gives the state a lot fewer options in terms of how it powers itself. And plus electricity is crazy expensive. And plus you got a ton of sunlight. So that combination has pushed what's happening in Hawaii a couple, 5-10 years ahead of the rest of the world. And the rest of the world needs to pay a lot of attention. But the main thing that I get to in my book is that the price of solar and the price of batteries are continuing to decline at unprecedented rates. And this is incredibly disruptive to an industry that has been built on the economics of fuels, right? So we read in the news about the price of natural gas and how that affects electricity. And Texas didn't have enough natural gas supply because it froze up during February. This is the world of the grid that has been in place for 100 years. And as you start to switch to solar and batteries, the economic model changes entirely. And nobody is ready for this. And the part that's particularly disruptive, and I think is really cool, is the fact that you can build a giant solar plant, you can build a giant battery project like they've done in Australia and many places in the US, but the economics are shockingly similar to do small ones. You can't do a small coal plant. You certainly can't do a household scale nuclear plant. I don't think anyone would ever buy one anyway. But you can do a small scale solar plant. And the last thing I'll say, Josh, and this is probably one of the things that drives me most crazy about the argument. I just read an editorial in the Los Angeles Times today, and they were pro net metering and pro small scale, but they echoed the same wrong argument that everybody echoes, which is, but it's cheaper to put up these large scale systems. So, as if this is some kind of tension, but part of what I want to get out with the book is that it isn't cheaper. It's cheaper if you're the utility, if you're PG&E or you're Southern Company or ComEd, and you put up a giant solar plant, it is cheaper. But if they put up if PG&E puts up a giant solar plant and it's so inexpensive for them, do my electricity bills go down if I live in California? No.
Right.
But if I put up solar on my roof, which I have, my electricity bills went down immediately. So why the industry, even advocates, continue to echo this refrain that it's cheaper to build large scale just is completely nuts to me. And that's one of the many, I have 18 reasons why small scale solar and batteries are better. That's one of the big ones.
That's exciting, and I get that. There's Nico. Hey, buddy. The notion that the utility is going to provide us with objective truth on LCOE or cost of deployment in order to get your bills down, it's a bit counterintuitive. It's just, we've been through this for years, right? So one of the things that is I find really exciting with what you just described is that we are seeing just mass deployments of solar plus batteries in Hawaii at the moment, right?
Yes.
And one of the really cool things that I found on this documentary that we're working on is in the microgrid section, that certain areas that have been white spaces in the past that haven't been able to get access to solar and batteries. For example, rental housing, workforce housing, areas like this, right? I'm seeing new technologies being discussed by Brian Patterson at Emerge Alliance, a DC think tank, working on ways to do hybridization of the grid, DC, AC, really neat stuff. But I'm also seeing it deployed in parallel to his kind of discussions of where the grid, the future is going. I'm seeing it deployed here with guys like Ted Peck in Holu Ho. He's a really remarkable guy, and he put together a system that's completely, it's like 50, 100 units of workforce housing where they're coming in with capital, they're coming in with the ability to actually put solar and batteries, lithium iron phosphate, by the way, batteries on all these units, and they have DC bus in the entire back flowing, right? So this stuff that's being discussed in certain areas and think tanks is actually happening out here, and I love connecting these worlds. It's just so cool. So the area of the fringe, the grid edge, where solar plus batteries are going to just, I think, flourish. We're starting to see that happen in really interesting and new spaces here in Hawaii that I expect to see in the rest of the country as well. Can't wait to read your book, my friend. Can't wait to read it.
Thank you.
We've got one more well-known and respected voice to add to the stream. Going to bring in our friend Tim Montague. Tim, how you doing?
Hey, Nico. Good to see you.
There he is. Hey, Tim.
Likewise, brother.
Hey, Bill. Hey, Josh.
Hi, Tim.
Well, Tim,
you
I'd
still
like
got
to...
your green screen on, dude. You got to give us some cool background to look at.
Yeah,
I don't know how to use StreamYard, bro.
Well, it's in the if you have backgrounds, it's just in the settings under cam and mic, so
Okay,
you can
I'll
just
fix
find it down
that.
there. But tinker with that in a moment. I would like to, you are the only other person that I'm aware of, Bill could probably correct us, that has actually interviewed Bill for his book and that is already published. I'd love to know, Josh was talking about how he's looking forward to reading the book. You and I have read the book. What was like your one or two top takeaways from reading Bill's book? Thing that surprised you the most?
I love how Bill beats up the utility industry, honestly.
Hey, I'm nice to the utilities. Come on.
We humans, we're, we're basically at the mercy of the utilities, and that business model is very old, and it
Yes.
did work, but it doesn't work for the new world, right? We have DG now. We have this thing called solar and batteries, and we shouldn't be beholden to the utilities to allow us or not, right? That should be a human right to free our energy.
A human right. I should have put that in my book. Tim Montague says it's a human right. I like it.
Put that on
Yeah.
the dust cover.
I think we need the utilities, and I have a lot of ideas in the book, and I've talked to a lot of smart people about how the utilities thrive through this. But you said it well, Tim. I think what needs to change is this 100-year-old business model they've absolutely locked in, and
Yeah.
it just doesn't provide any choice. And choice drives innovation. Innovation drives better products and services and costs for customers. And it's due time to make some changes there. Hopefully, some people read my book and agree, and we can start a small local energy revolution, as we call it.
One of
Doesn't it seem
Go ahead.
like the control grip that the utility has had on how we, how they produce, distribute, and how we consume power? It seems like it's lessening, and I tend to think of it over the years as it lessens with the greater power and energy capabilities that these systems have, the greater flexibility we have in our homes to be able to decide how we manage energy. There's just little that can be done at the end of the day from the utility perspective when you put a solar plus battery system on your home and you're consuming what you're producing and then getting what you need from the utility as a secondary, right? So it's like, it seems to me there's a natural shifting of power in place, and there'll be some squirming and some fidgeting on and not wanting that to happen. But I mean, what really can be done? You can put in laws, but it's inevitable, I think.
Well, there's about 1,000 of the highest paid lawyers in the country working very hard to answer that question, Josh. They want to find a way to slow it down. And listen, a lot of people. I was looking at my mother's savings, and she's got some money in utilities because that's an incredibly good place to park your money for a long term with good dividends. And so the utilities play a really diverse role in American society, and I think we have to be careful how we reinvent them. And they're really not interested in being reinvented right now. But I think it's the cool thing is, and if you look at all technologies, and I've been doing tech for my life, you have this situation where regardless of what the politicians, regardless of what the strategists tell you, when consumers decide they want something, they ultimately get their way because consumers are voters. So it's important that we work through all this complicated, wonky stuff. But in the end, like in Hawaii, listen, I want to have solar because it's cheaper and it's better and it's cleaner, and that's my contribution to the world and my family and my wallet. And and then the utilities and regulators have to figure it out. And that's what I think is what we'll see in the rest of the country and the world in the coming years.
Yeah, one thing I would like to add very briefly about that is that there's, in a sense, in Hawaii, we're seeing that there's a false dichotomy here. There's a false sense that is it utility or is it residential or is it CNI? Because we simply don't have, and I love this. I love this because we've spent kind of muted here. I'll fix that up, guys. We spent years essentially arguing with the utility to get more sectors open. I remember all the different language. It changed year by year, whether it was penetration or feeder this or that. It had all this new language, But the bottom line is that right now, in order for Oahu to hit its 100% renewable energy mandate, there aren't enough roofs to do the job. So, you could put in all the big solar you want, and now the utility has to come knocking at the door.
I love it. I love it.
Hey, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, can we rent your roof from you? It's great. It's like, sure, you can rent it from us, but I got a price for you that I'm going to work out.
Yes.
So I love that.
Very
I love
ironic.
that time. Yes,
I love
it is
Hawaii.
ironic.
Everything I love about Hawaii, except when you're having blizzards.
Climate change is going to affect Hawaii along with everyone else in ways that we can't anticipate. Tim, let's do a mic check. Let's see if you got your gain fixed.
Yeah, I hope so. I
It's
spent a lot of
coming
money
through a
on
little.
this microphone.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, there's a couple of things that I think would be fun for us to touch on, and I'm wondering. I just heard some
Something
background noise. Did you guys hear that? Like background dropped.
Now the background came back.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm messing with mine to get my my.
Porter, stop messing with stuff,
Yep.
man.
Sorry, man. I got a lot of buttons here.
So there's a couple of things that are on my mind that I wanted to talk about, and we could talk at length about many of them. And in fact, Tim has been spending a fair amount of time on Clubhouse talking about a lot of these topics, but as they relate to, Bill, your book and kind of what we've seen in 2021 as we reflect back on the year, there are two topics that stand out to me. The one is by far the biggest topic in my mind of the clean energy revolution of 2021, and that is just the breakout year that electric vehicles have had. Namely, so we've got the Ford Lightning. Tesla's had a banner year in every single market they're in. Not only that, but also in the stock market where many of us are shareholders. And Lucid Air named Motor Trend Car of the Year, to my great surprise. So I'd like for us to talk, so we'll like put a notch here for electric vehicles. And the other category, which Bill, you and I talked about a little bit, and all four of us have talked at length about in other forums, is what one of my guests referred to as the inevitability of hydrogen. So which one do we want to take first, hydrogen or electric vehicles?
Well, hydrogen's a big one, so let's start with EVs, if the EVs aren't the big one. But I mean, hydrogen's a big conversation, right?
Yeah.
And EVs are fun. There's just so much going on in that space. We certainly did a full sector video on that. That was the longest one at 29 minutes, and I'm scratching my head on how to shorten it. But I mean, the bottom line is when we think about electric vehicles, I'll just start it like this. There's some really fun stuff happening outside of simple passenger EVs. I mean, we have a BYD bus pilot here in Kahului as an example, right? Yeah. You've got the electrification of aviation with George Bai Aerospace. He has a 2-seater, a 4-seater. He recently announced an 8-seater. Now, these are short-haul kind of planes that do a couple of 100 kilometers. They're not like long-haul stuff. But I mean, you also have the hybrid stuff with Amp Air. Then you have there are electric trains that are being developed right now and tested in California. It goes across the board. We did a show with, of course, the Maid of the Mist, the iconic passenger ferry that goes out to Niagara Falls, and that's a fully electrified catamaran.
Wow,
right?
I know that.
Yeah, really cool stuff that's going on all across the country, right down to from and then the case for fleet vehicles like Amazon and what's going on with Rivian and all of that is huge. I mean, there's just so much opportunity in electrification of transpo in general, and then we get to see what's happening with all these sick EVs that we have an opportunity to buy soon, hopefully, once supply chain issues start getting less wonky. And then when we talk about something like the F-150, I'll just kind of sit on this one, but the F-150, this is the best-selling passenger vehicle of all time. People are so brand loyal to this thing. You can use power tools, you can back up your house. Now, I know, my Ford Sync on my F-150 has been broken for a while, so I'm a little bit concerned about their ability to do an EV with all the cool stuff it needs to. But that being said, I still am ready to rock and roll with an F-150 Lightning. I think that is fantastic. That could be the real shift, right, in mass adoption, the hockey stick, if you will, for EVs. And that's my way to set it up, guys. Jump on it. I mean, I think that's what's going on.
It's hot, and there's still a lot of hype, though. Like, I was a Tesla owner. Now I'm back to my ICE engine, so I can tow my trailer. I have a deposit on a Ford Lightning, on a Rivian truck, and a Cybertruck. And whoever gets it to me first wins. Okay.
Well, Ford's gonna win that one.
But man, I mean, I heard Rivian's only rolling off one car a day right now. And as Elon Musk says, right, the devil is in mass production. It's easy to make a few cars. It's hard to make a lot of cars.
Yeah.
So
check
true.
Out Doug DeMoro, guys. He did some reviews on the Lightning.
Yes.
He did some reviews on the Rivian.
I love his stuff.
Really good stuff.
Nice.
Yeah, great reviews.
Stuff.
Billy, what were you saying?
I think that electric vehicles are so much more than just the things we talked about, which is what I get excited about, right? So they're not just better cars, which is a start. They're not just cleaner cars, which they are. And soon they're going to be cheaper cars, which I think is universally going to be the case. They're going to last longer. Yeah. So it's like going from vacuum tubes to transistors for anyone that's old enough to know that. But what I really get excited about—
Good analogy, I like that.
I get excited as a business person, as a one-time venture capitalist, is that EVs are wildly disruptive to adjacent markets.
Yeah.
So and Ford Lightning was the first one to really focus on this. I had a great guy on my podcast, Lauren McDonald, who runs EV adoption. He's got some of the best numbers and data on charging and on EVs and capacity. We talked a lot about the Ford Lightning. He's also driven in all these cars. He goes to these events, pretty high-placed guy in that field. And not only does the Ford Lightning do V2G, but they're leading with it from a marketing point of view. You can plug this car in and run your house during an outage. And this isn't even a baby step. This is like the baby sitting up.
Right.
Because just powering the house during an outage is small, but the fact that you get this almost free, you have to have an adapter for your house, but it's almost free. But then you start to move in larger steps towards baby steps where you can actually choose to power your house from your car. And these cars today have 60, 80, 100 kilowatt hours, which is the average American home consumes a total of 30 kilowatt hours a day. So you're looking at cars that even if you have no solar, can power your house for days. And all of a sudden, the economics of battery powering your house change dramatically. You basically go to a zero marginal cost to put batteries on your house. Now, obviously, you want to don't want your car to get so low you can't drive it around, but these are easy problems to fix. And people, you talk to people in the power industry, and they get their hair up about, well, intermittency of solar. It's a big problem. We don't know what to do about it. What if the car battery isn't charged when you want to go? And I say on behalf of everyone who's been in the tech industry, they solve problems like that Monday morning, right? These are trivial, technical, algorithmic, consumer preference problems. They were solving these problems 20 years ago. So the consequences of solving them wrong here are larger, to be sure, but these are not hard problems to solve. There are so many behavioral, technological, science issues. There's so many ways to solve the problems of intermittency or using your car to charge your house and not running out of driving distance. There are so many ways to fix this, to address it, I'm a big believer, an optimist, that this is an inevitability, and these EVs are going to be a central part of how we power our homes and how our homes power our vehicles.
I love what you said about how adjacent industries, the disruption to adjacent industries.
Yes.
To me, I haven't used that language before, guys, but I tend to think of these, undiscovered little golden nuggets when these industries kind of get close to one another. I see that throughout all the entire sector, and I constantly look for those. And then when they pop up, I get so excited, But in the case of this particular one, when you look at like the F-150 as an example, or just EVs in general with bidirectionality as potential, there's a couple of chargers out there. Wallbox, I think, out of Spain. That there was some acquisition related to them recently, and then there's a couple other guys in Canada that are doing some things related to bidirectional charging. And so, when you have that, what's neat about it is, in order to put in a solar plus battery system, it's a fairly substantial cost at the moment, right? You're talking about, I personally would need at least 2 power walls as a marker, right, to give you a sense. But if what you have an EV, like you said, the marginal cost of these batteries goes down to almost nothing. So then you can maybe get a smaller battery. And that's nice. And then there's a lot of things happening in the generator space. PWR, the Generac guys. And then I just got off a show with Raghu from Enphase again, and he's talking about fuel cells. Wow. And then there's Solar Edge working on the Energy Hub system, and they have a generator port. I've got one sitting right here in my office, ready to be deployed forever. So it's like,
that's cool.
You've got all of these guys that are working on that solar plus battery and that EV, bidirectional EV kind of suite, if you will, tech suite, if you will, really changes the game. All of a sudden, and solar's cheap. You throw solar up on there, now we have an abundance of electrons. That scarcity mindset of energy starts to kind of dissipate, man. And now we're in a place where it's like, I got boatloads of electrons. What do I do with these things? Where do I put them? Right? That's where we're headed.
I've got in this book, I've got, just real quickly, I've got this model, this framework called 5 orders, and the 5th order is when one industry leaps into another, like Uber did into taxis.
Right.
Anyway, I love all the stuff you're talking about. It really resonates a lot.
Well, when we talked about the leaping industries, Uber leaping into taxis was a direct leap, and it was like they're taking like technology and app-enabled services to disrupt a direct service. The one that many of us saw coming but didn't expect to see, like especially through the pandemic, just take hold the way it did, was how Uber disrupted food service and food distribution. Right now, all of a sudden, DoorDash and Instacart are watching their backs because the big guy in the room is Uber, and they already have hundreds of thousands of drivers. It's like, Bill, I want to come to us. I know that you have to run. I want to grab a little nugget of wisdom from you around one other way that you actually call it sort of a backdoor, a Trojan horse, that electric vehicles are going to disrupt our industry. And this is one that blew my mind when I kind of grokked what you were trying to say, I don't know how much you want to give away versus folks needing to read the book or listen to our podcast episode, but give a little bit of wisdom here around how electric vehicles and are changing the status quo, or they're challenging the way we think about how electricity is bought and sold.
First of all, I love the fact that you used the word grok. Thank you for that on behalf of all science fiction nerds.
Definitely.
You're welcome.
When I was putting the book together, I wanted to pull in some crazy big ideas, things I was pretty sure would happen, but were crazy. And one of the favorites you reference is something that electric vehicles will do to disrupt the existing utility industry. And the main basis, the laws, the monopoly laws for utilities around the world, basically say no one else can sell a kilowatt hour. And so you guys remember back in the early EV charging days, you paid for charging by how long you were connected, not how many kilowatt hours you bought. And that was somewhat of a constraint to change before the laws got changed. Now I think over 40 states or 30 states have amended those laws to say you can sell EV charging by the kilowatt hour. That's why I call this a Trojan horse, because this is the first eyes wide open crack in the monopoly laws that allows other people to sell kilowatt hours.
Yeah.
And so how cool is it? I call it mobile battery to home. I'm gonna go drive up to Tim in my EV, or drive up to see you in North Carolina in my EV, and we're talking, and your app talks to my app, and it says, by the way, it was rainy here for the last 2 days. My battery's down a little bit lower, so my car just drives over your wireless charger, and I drop 10 kilowatt hours in your house to your home batteries, and you might give me $1 over Venmo or something, but then it's really cool. And by the way, that's legal. You'll be allowed to do that. The really cool part is, if you live in the cities or suburban America like I do, how many vehicles are driving by my house or to my house every day? Amazon, occasional pizza deliveries. Jimmy John's has come here more times than I want to admit in public. And every time someone shows up, especially these panel vans that have these large batteries, they can plug in or drive over a wireless charging for 10 minutes and drop 10 kilowatt hours in my house, and I'll gladly pay them $2 or $3 for it. And the reason I don't think anywhere near the majority of people in the future will want to be off the grid, but what this means is they have the choice.
Yeah.
They want to completely defect from the grid, RMI's grid defection notion. They actually have a genuine opportunity to do it, and I'm telling you today, tens of billions of dollars of new businesses will be started solving this sort of interim and totally legal within the monopoly utility laws way of powering your house. And the fact that it exists means that for the first time, the utilities have to come to the table with a genuine alternative to them, which today there is none, and they always have the stronger hand because of that.
That's right.
I think more people than you might guess would want to defect from the grid if they could.
It might be unanimous in this call.
I would say.
And it should be illegal for the utilities to not allow this. So that's the thing, is
that
I feel like we are still at the mercy of the utilities, especially in co-op and muni country here in Illinois. It's brutal. If you're in co-op and muni country, you can forget about it. If you want resiliency, it's not happening. At least in the IOUs, you're incentivized.
Is it possible to go? I've heard debates, Tim. Do you know whether it's actually illegal to generate your entire electricity if you choose to never connect to the grid? I've never heard a definitive answer on that.
I don't know about that.
Okay.
But the limits on KWs are very restrictive. Like 10 kW. Like that's okay.
Yeah, same here.
If you're not
the limits on what you're allowed to put on your site, you mean?
Yeah.
And that's because the systems are dumb, and it's an export limit. So they limit the size of your system. But I have
that applies to commercial too.
Yeah. But it's because the systems are dumb. That will go away.
The rules are
that
just
will go
crazy
away.
Stupid.
The technology is that's just a remnant of early technology. I mean, Nico came up to my place in North Georgia, and we have a 20 kilowatt array there. My EMC only allows 10 kilowatt export. So this is some older SolarEdge equipment. But the only way to do it was to tell SolarEdge to never let the system generate over 10 kilowatts, 10 kilowatt hours. Never. Yeah. So I literally have all these solar panels out there, and my inverters are just burning off excess heat when it approaches 10 kilowatts. So
waiting for the day that you can put it somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. And I should be able to have them go up to full 20 kilowatt hour or 20 kilowatt generation when I'm running my air conditioners. But that's not an option with the 5-year-old technology. 5 years from now, everybody will do it. That 10 kilowatt limit will be less constraining than it is today, I think.
Well, Bill, I know that you need to run. I wanted to say congratulations on the launch of your book today. I'm looking forward to listening. I haven't yet to the Clean Power Hour interview that Tim did with you. I'd encourage everyone to listen to the longer version interview, but if you can't, then today we published a short version interview with Bill that is really, really good. It's an hour and 5 minutes, well worth listening to. Bill, thanks for joining us.
For both of you guys
brother.
Sharing your audiences with my story, and hopefully we'll get the word out there, man. Enjoy the
you're welcome.
conference, Nico. I wish I was there with you, and thanks for putting
Likewise.
this together today. It's always great to see Tim and Josh and you, and we'll look forward to doing this in a big way next week.
Fantastic. Well, we'll
right,
see you
guys.
again soon, brother. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Bye-bye.
See you, Bill.
Well, guys, we're going to go over to the next topic, and we got, let's call it 10, 15 minutes. No way we could possibly cover that because, Tim, you've done probably 3 hours alone of hydrogen in Clubhouse. Why don't you start, Tim, with setting the stage based on the conversations that you're having on Clubhouse, and maybe introduce Club Pod and the stuff that you're doing for clean tech podcasting in that area. And I can talk a little bit about my project. I know Josh has done a ton of research on his as well. So go ahead, you kick it off, Tim.
Yeah, I don't by any stretch consider myself an expert on hydrogen. I've gotten to know a hydrogen entrepreneur, Joe Alfred from Allied Power, and they're targeting the transportation industry, especially long-haul trucking, with retrofitting diesel trucks with a hydrogen fuel cell power train, and then building a network of charging stations that generate hydrogen on site using, I can never remember, it's sodium hydroxide and aluminum, which is it's an exothermic reaction, meaning when you put these two chemicals together, and it's just like aluminum, like a beer can aluminum. You put it in a tub together, you stir it up, and it gets hot and generates heat, and then you make electricity, and hydrogen comes off. You store the hydrogen, put that in a fuel cell, and then you've got, voila, a trucking gas station network. So that's going to be a thing. It's just a question of how soon. And it's great to see, I'm so curious. This is a great question for you guys. Like, why the heck are the Japanese automakers and the Korean automakers still going after hydrogen fuel cell consumer vehicles when the economics just aren't there? And they subsidize them. So I get it. That's how the people are buying these cars, because they get free hydrogen for several years. But the economics aren't there. And I don't think the first principles are there anytime soon. For trucking, it's another matter. And then my question is, well, why the heck isn't Elon going after hydrogen if it's so good, boys? I always ask, why isn't because he's the smartest guy that I don't know, but that I know of, so to speak. And then on Clubhouse, do check it out. If you're listening to this and you're not on Clubhouse, check it out. It's an audio only platform, and there's audio only with Twitter now has their own version, and Spotify has their own version, but it's live events and now recorded events, and you can boot up a conversation. I'm connected to a group called Club Pod, which was founded by Steve Olsher, who founded Podcast Magazine. And I have to thank you, Nico, for this connection, because we went to Podcast Movement down in Nashville this summer, and that was my awakening. Like, I didn't even know that podcasting was such a big industry. It's a hugely fast-growing industry. Yeah. And there's over 200 energy and sustainability-related podcasts now, so we have to keep on our toes, boys. But
we definitely do.
Hydrogen, I'm optimistic about green hydrogen. I'm very cynical about blue and gray hydrogen. So maybe we can touch on that as well.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. We also have I have a club on Clubhouse that I'm woefully abject, irresponsible for, called Clean Energy Revolution. We are going to be hosting some upcoming conversations around hydrogen on Clubhouse, and it's one of the things I hope Tim will probably help mod that room. So if you are on Clubhouse, I would encourage you to go subscribe to Club Pod, subscribe to or join the Clean Energy Revolution Club on there as well, so that you get notified when we have upcoming conversations. In particular, and I expect that this Friday we will drop the teaser episode for our 5-part series that we've been recording over the last 2 months. We are working on a 5-part story around green hydrogen. And so I went from almost complete noob, because I've listened to Porter, your episodes, but I went from almost complete noob to, I would say, novice, not intermediate, but novice understanding of how green hydrogen, how how that green hydrogen economy, as it were, is meant to work and where it's going. One of the things, to echo what you said, Tim, that came through all of the conversations I had, which included Rafi Garabedian, the former CTO of First Solar. We have Sheldon Kimber from Intersect, CEO at Intersect. Jason Goodhand, who leads the storage division for DNVGL. A guy named Joachim von Scheele from Linde. Linde is the largest gas and hydrogen provider in the world. That was really, really fascinating conversation. That's the 5th in this series. And we've also got Baraj Bakhtoria, who is one of the top 10 analysts for the oil and gas industry. And we go into kind of how the market see it, how industry sees hydrogen. What about this idea of color? How does it affect emission, scopes 1, 2, and 3 emissions in terms of how industry needs to think about integrating hydrogen? And the overarching, by far, there were 2 overarching themes that really surprised me. The first is disconcerting for the reasons that we saw kind of in California and also with Toyota now with the Mirage or whatever they call it. And that is that Mirage, like almost no one I've talked to believes that, especially for any sort of short haul, for anything other than long haul, and even then some question marks, no one believes that hydrogen should exist in the conversation. There are so many other better uses for it. That was point one, and I didn't expect that they would be so vehemently against hydrogen in the transportation sector. And again, that's not long haul. There are some use cases, and I would encourage you guys to go check out Michael Lieberich's Hydrogen Ladder, which he posted on LinkedIn. You can just search Michael Lieberich Hydrogen Ladder on LinkedIn. It's a great read. And there's a couple of LinkedIn commentators I'll link to in the series when we post it, who are amazing advocates for myths around hydrogen, and they really try to demystify hydrogen as a category. But the thing that surprised me the most was the, again, overarching and overwhelming agreement and consent to the fact that without abundant clean energy generation, predominantly from solar and wind, hydrogen as a category to become green won't exist. And that the number one limiting factor is the cost of deployment of electrolyzers that can scale to gigawatt size electrolyzers. And the only way to do that is to have effectively near zero cost electrons that you can feed into those electrolyzers, which the only way to abate carbon in doing that is to pump in green electrons from solar, wind, and other clean energy generation resources. I'm going to kick it over to you, Porter, before I talk too long. What do you have that maybe is new, or some of the revelations that you've discovered over the last year as you've really dug into hydrogen?
Yeah. Okay. So, thank you for that. You covered a lot of ground there, Nico, for sure. Look, the attraction of hydrogen, I think, is ubiquity, right? So we're surrounded by it. It's in the water I just drank, right? It's everywhere around us, and we live in a world where we've been making electrons, or getting electrons moving in a big genset somewhere, and then shifting it along copper lines across a bunch of dead trees, right? That's what our electric system is. And hydrogen is this kind of key. It's definitely directly related to the deployment of renewable energies. And so when we think about the fact that we have these, a lot of the times when you move towards large, mandates of 100% renewable energies, you have these moments in time, you have to oversize these systems to make that thing happen. And then you have all of these extra electrons at given moments, and curtailment becomes a very real issue. That happens in hydro, that happens in wind, that happens in solar. So you have curtailment. Now, what does curtailment mean? It means you're just burning off electrons. Okay, so when that happens, because you're en route to this 100% renewable energy mandate, as we all will be inevitably, when we do that, we need a place to put those electrons, and then electrolyzers, electrolyzing water as one way to create, the primary way to create green hydrogen. That's so exciting, right? There's so much you can do with that, and it effectively at that moment is a battery, a storage mechanism. It is a time shift. It is a massive time shift that you can just put all that energy into that otherwise would have been curtailed, and then store it right there and say, when do we use this? Well, maybe we use it for firm power later on in the grid. Maybe we use it for transpo. Maybe we use it for passenger or long haul vehicles shipping, or maybe we use it for maritime. I mean, there's plenty of opportunities there, right? So I think that's kind of what it comes down to. But the problem is, hydrogen is this kind of politicized element, if you will, right? It's this thing that from the Hindenburg on up has been this kind of scary thing. It's been fearful in people's minds for a century, right? So now we're in this place where hydrogen has all this potential, and it's so exciting. There's so much that could happen with it. But when you talk about, for example, the colors of hydrogen, be it green, which is effectively a low carbon hydrogen, and how we define green versus blue versus gray versus pink, nuclear, versus turquoise, some combination of those, right? We really, I think there's the potential for a lot of obscurement in that. We got to be very careful about these things because it really comes down to carbon intensity. And I believe in the new bills that are coming out of the feds right now, they're trying to define hydrogen not in terms of its color, which was an exciting concept, the color, because we can kind of lock into those things, but really in terms of just its carbon intensity. How much carbon is associated with a certain amount of hydrogen, right? So when we understand that, then we have kind of truth in hydrogen. We can say, we know what this thing is. It produces this. We can do the math on it. And I do think, tracking back, Tim, to your question about the Japanese, I happen to do work with a lot of Japanese energy companies. They come to Hawaii for various reasons, and I host them when they're here. And a couple of them were discussing years back, we're talking about 4 or 5 years ago, about how they're using refineries in Southeast Asia to create hydrogen, definitely not green, and moving it up to Japan. So there's a supply of hydrogen in Japan that's being used for example, like home power systems and stuff like that. It seems like pilot tested, subsidized type of industry, but it's been there for quite a while, right? So that the Japanese kind of have this concept of using hydrogen, and it's available from actually oil companies in some cases. Yeah. So we got to be careful about that happening here. I think the big concern about hydrogen, fellas, is this potential for the oil and gas industry to kind of hijack it, right? So green hydrogen is this just huge opportunity for us to take renewable energies through to major penetration, major 100% renewable energy mandates, for example. But it's also the potential for the oil and gas guys to get in there and kind of do business as usual game and maybe kind of hijack it and put it into not so good of a space. So that's my concern.
Yeah,
it's interesting
I would echo that, Josh, big time.
Go ahead.
The oil giants are betting on blue and gray hydrogen. And, you can make hydrogen from methane, which is carbon and hydrogen. Methane is super simple, right? And methane is not only a primary product of the oil and gas industry, but it's a secondary product also when you break down raw oil. So they want stuff to do with that. And it is a good story because it's clean, but you can be clean and dirty at the same time. So we got to be careful.
It can be very dirty. It can be very dirty. Even in, just real quick, even in if you use just air when you're electrolyzing rather than pure oxygen, you can create all kinds of nasty emissions, right? So there's a whole series of problems in how this can be implemented. But one of the things I do want to say is that I did get a chance to talk to people at the policy level, then talk to people in the largest electrolyzer project in the country, which is at the Wells project in Washington at their hydro facility. It's 5 megawatts, right? It's the largest, and it'll be the largest for a year or so until plug power in Alabama, New York kicks in, right? But
in the U.S.
in the U.S. And then when you look at what are you going to do with that energy, and we talked to guys in Maritime that are deploying the first. We got a good mic there. We talked about guys in Maritime that are deploying the first hydrogen ferry in San Francisco right now by Switch, right? So you look at production, you look at utilization of that, you look at its relationship to renewable energies, and it's just a very exciting arc. But it could definitely be corrupted by the oil and gas bad guys, if you want my opinion.
So I appreciate that opinion, and I want us to be careful about how we language this, because in my research, there will not be a hydrogen economy without the oil and gas sector. So the oil and gas sector refers to integrating renewables as sector coupling. So it's actually a terminology that we need to add to our repertoire of how we think and speak about this, because sector coupling is real. There are, some of the things that I've learned are the extreme difficulty really with, and there are modest attempts at it right now, but like the difficulty with upgrading, for example, natural gas pipelines to accommodate hydrogen, which it would take too long to accommodate here in this conversation, is not insignificant. The difficulty with actually transporting hydrogen, which is what's going to happen by and large through, I'm glad you mentioned Japan, through Japan's mass adoption of hydrogen, because Japan needs to have alternative sources, and hydrogen serves as a great, it's really it is a very, I'll say, hoped for technological shift in the Japanese economy, and we actually talk a lot about that in one of the episodes in our series. And the fact is, Japan doesn't have anywhere near the amount of real estate to generate the clean electrons and electrolyze the hydrogen. So there are deals being done right now between Australia and other Australasian economies to supply hydrogen to Japan. So I think that
floating solar, bro. Come on, floating solar.
Yeah, but it won't be. It still won't be enough, especially not with the prevalence of typhoons in Japan.
Typhoons knock that stuff out.
Although I'm a huge fan, as you know, of floating solar, and I think that anywhere there's a wastewater district that has an open water system should have floating solar, and anywhere there's someone who has a spare 1 or more acre plot of water acreage that is a pond on their property should be covering that with solar. That's it. For me, it's a no-brainer.
We should point out that the reason we're so excited about hydrogen is long-term storage or long-duration storage, right? That's what renewables need, and there's many ways to skin this cat. I just came back from ESA in Phoenix, the Energy Storage Association conference, which is now merging with ACP, the conference that you're at, Nico. I'm kind of sad about that. We don't have time to go into that, but anyway. One of the companies I met there was Energy Dome, which is using compressed CO2. So you take clean energy, compress CO2, and then release it and make energy with it. So there's a lot of cool things happening in the long duration
storage.
Space. Yes.
You know what's interesting is a lot before I started doing research on this, Tim. A lot of my questions formed around the general notion that had been hypothesized and sort of floated to me that hydrogen was going to be useful in long duration storage. And in episode 2, I talked to Jason Goodhand, and not only Jason but many others that I've talked to in and outside of this series that we did don't point to hydrogen as a key I'll call it sector coupling, like renewables and storage, a key component to the storage economy. There are just better ways to store electrons, and I'd be curious, Tim, as we continue to speak with folks. I'm actually still actively having this conversation, as I know you are, saying, okay, well, where does hydrogen fit in with regard to storage, and how specifically is it going to be used in a more useful way? And I think this is one key aspect that we have to really think about, and it's something that I drilled down a lot on in my interviews. If we think about real estate being used for its highest and best use, what we are going to have to really rationalize as an economy, or as an industry and as a society, is as we proliferate terawatt hours of renewable energy, are we using that renewable energy and that renewable electron for its highest and best use, especially with regard to decarbonizing our grid and reducing the overall amount of CO2 in the atmosphere? So that's something for us to ponder. I don't think we're at a whole lot of time to go further into it. We're right at the top, at the hour mark of having started the broadcast, so I want to be sensitive to that. But we really need to challenge the notion that we're using those green electrons in the highest and best use, most effective and efficient format. And with regard to hydrogen, the argument that has been proposed to me is simply that hard-to-abate industries like steel presently could take all of the green hydrogen in production or plan to be in production, and it would still make a relative non-event in their hydrogen requirements. And that's not even looking at ammonia production, which is the larger use of hydrogen in the world right now. So I'd love to hear parting thoughts from you guys on what you are, what you're most, like, maybe let's say, what's your most, the most exciting thing that you reflect on from 2021 that has you excited about 2022 as your parting thought? And then feel free to share how folks can tune in to your various communication channels so that we can get them on there?
Tim, you're welcome to take it up, man.
Oh, cool. Well, check out my website, CleanPower21.com. We dropped an episode with Mr. Spadaccini, the CEO of Dome Energy, this morning. So that was a fun interview. And I'm super pumped for long duration storage. And it's a family of technologies. It's not any one. There's no clear leader there. There's companies, that are making thermal storage, heating up sand. Malta Energy is doing this, right?
Yeah.
And they were at the conference. And you can take CO2, you can take air and liquefy air and make a battery out of that.
Yeah.
And air, of course, is ubiquitous. And solar energy is ubiquitous. We're swimming in solar energy. And so I'm most excited, though, about the real bleeding edge stuff, because we've got solar PV down. Okay, solar, wind, battery storage, that's a done deal. We just need to deploy a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
But then we also have to do direct air capture. And so I'm pumped for the carbon engineering and the Climeworks projects. Check out Climeworks Orca. I haven't done any interviews on my show yet, but I'm looking forward to geeking out on direct air capture on Clubhouse and on my podcast. And I do have a room on Clubhouse now. It's called Clean Energy Podcasters. So if you're into clean energy, come. It's not just for podcasters. We're geeking out on the energy transition on Mondays right now. Monday nights at 7:30 Central, 8:30 Eastern, and 5:30 Pacific.
Tim, you know what we should do is each one of us should commit to a night as a host. I think in that Clean Energy Podcasters, because that sort of feels like it'd be right to fit the niche, right?
It's a great idea, but it's a very hard problem to solve.
It is, because I've tried to jump on with you many times, but I think that if we committed each individually to host a night, and we're really just looking for 7 podcasters. So like I'll take a night, and I'll work out with you, Tim, what night that'll be. Tim, I know you've got Monday nights, so I'll take another night. Porter, what night would work for you? Do you commit to taking a night on Clubhouse?
I do commit to taking a night. We'll give it a shot for sure.
Nice.
It's a great idea. And I don't even know exactly what Clubhouse is. I have it on my phone, but I'm
Awesome.
sure it's a good thing. So, and then I don't know which night. We'll have to talk about that afterwards. But I like the idea of it. It sounds great, and I'd love to collaborate with y'all.
Well, let's round it out with you before I give my big reflection from 2021. What are you reflecting on in 2021 that has got you excited about 2022?
Oh gosh. Look, hey, maybe we're coming through this pandemic, right? And this was this kind of global self-reflection of, wow, we're vulnerable, and we're vulnerable on something on a global scale. And maybe we can use this in a positive way to kind of look at climate change that seems to be hitting us like day by day with new records. Right now, we're in some bizarre storm in Hawaii that I've never seen quite like before, right?
Right.
And maybe we can use this experience to kind of, get this conversation, catalyzed, and get the projects moving and get the policies written. Maybe it's going to be a little bit more accelerated. I kind of feel like that could be the case in 2022. I'll tell you what. And then there's so much that I'm genuinely excited about when it comes to new technologies, whether it's EV or whether it's wind or whether it's microgrid or whether it's energy storage and all the technical stuff there. But of course, the killer apps, in a sense, if you think of the world of renewables in the sense, like all the cool stuff we can do with it. And those are like the EVs, for example, right? So of course, the best meeting place for killer apps of this world is Vegas, CES. That's in January, and we've been covering CES for a few years now. They're doing a lot with sustainability. They're increasing their floor space to something like 1.4 million square feet or some crazy thing like that. That's just around the corner. So that's a great way to kick off the year. I love CES in Vegas. Hopefully everything's cool and the new variants don't squash it. You know what I mean? But that's what I'm excited about, looking for. And of course, 2022 is a big year ahead. I hope we can take these videos, turn them into a legit feature film. That would be my primary goal. So that's what I'm up to. By the way, solar-coaster.com. I have not been putting out a lot of podcasts lately because we've been working in the editing room for a long time, but we'll be up there again soon.
Well, I'll round it out with a couple of things that are on my mind. So Tim mentioned that he and I met up for the first time in the pandemic, We had met before in person, hours and countless hours on the phone, but we met at Podcast Movement out in Nashville in August. And one of the things that came out of that is that we invited Tim, 2 weeks ago now, Tim, to be formally an advisor for Suncast, and so he's sort of sitting as a senior advisor on the direction of Suncast. And there are some things that Tim and I are going to announce here in the next 8 weeks or so that are pretty fun, and I think that you guys should all be excited about them. Porter, we've talked at length about the stuff that we want to collaborate with Solar Coaster on in the new year. So that was really interesting and fun. Thanks, Tim, for being such just a stalwart collaborator, someone who always challenges me to think differently about the way the business can grow and how we are truly peers in the industry helping one another. And as clean tech podcasters, we are not competitors. Like, we have one banner, and that is to educate the world on why the clean energy revolution is happening and how everyone else can contribute, participate, change your career, etc. With that said, the thing I'm reflecting on in 21 that has me super excited for 22 is that I get to see both of you guys in person next year, fingers crossed, which was a huge disappointment in September when we had to cancel SPI down in New Orleans. Well, SPI now RE Plus is going to happen. It's going to be in Anaheim. But before we even get to Anaheim, we've got Intersolar in January in California, in Long Beach. I'd encourage you, if you're watching and you haven't, if you're on the fence, just go. Tim and I will be there, and we haven't formally announced this, so this is the informal announcement that we have a podcast lounge that's going to be happening at Intersolar. I'm here, of course, at American Clean Power 21. Or Clean Power 22 is going to be in San Antonio in May. I would hope that you would be there, because we expect that we'll be able to do a Podcasters Lounge at ACP Conference, Clean Power 22 in San Antonio as well. So we got Intersolar, Clean Power 22, and RE Plus, where Tim and I are going to be producing a podcast lounge where you as podcasters and you as industry insiders can have your voice and your guests heard on a stage that we create and produce and curate for you. So that's what I'm super excited about in 2022, among the things that I can't even talk about with everybody yet. Stay tuned for our hydrogen series that's going to drop next week. And also in the new year, we've just signed a community solar series. So there's a lot of fun things that we're working on in the new year to educate and inform and help you all know how to participate better in the clean energy economy. Josh, so grateful, as always, that you join this show. Thank you for being here. Tim, thank you for being here as well. I'll let you guys sign off, and then we'll close it out.
My pleasure.
Hey,
Aloha, folks.
Nico.
Thank you very much.
All right. See you guys.
All right.